Stop messing around, stop fooling around, stop delaying, stop procrastinating. Get up, get out, get it done. Everything is possible, nothing is a problem, and anything can be overcome. I just get my ass up out of bed, I get my shit together, and I get out and I start the fight. And that will transform you from a mere mortal into a superhuman being. I've never, ever, ever met anybody who told me that they got rich watching their IRA or their 401k.
Welcome to the Daily Cash Flow. My name's George Robson.
I'm Peter Siegel.
So Peter, today I wanted to start with a familiar concept, diversification. It's something that we've heard a lot about. There's classic advice that you should diversify your portfolio.
Right.
Yet you've said before you're all in on real estate, and there's a lot of successful investors that don't necessarily subscribe to diversification in that same way. Why is that?
Well, I think for me and for the other people that you're referring to, diversification is really medicine for not having the confidence or skill set to invest successfully across these multiple areas and asset classes that define what diversification is. It's really tough, really tough to find one business, one investment that meets all of your criteria, the right risk return profile, the right amount of capital requirement, the right location, the right management, the right operator, the person executing, right? All of those things. You have to check all these boxes. Like, it's impossible to find one, let alone 10 or 20 or whatever number of investments you want to have in a portfolio to meet your diversification criteria. So when you find one and you can check all those boxes, go all in.
Why not stick with it?
You'll never be sorry that you overinvested in a successful investment. You'll always be sorry that you didn't allocate enough to a successful investment. For me, in commercial real estate, I've always said my two biggest concerns are an unprecedented act of Mother Nature and an unprecedented act of terrorism. So, but for those two things, I feel like I've got everything else dialed in. Now, if a horrible tsunami comes and wipes out all of my holdings on the coastline, then, I hope to have insurance account for some of that, but really I'm trying to solve for Mother Nature and terrorism. Short of those two things, I've got a good thing with commercial real estate, so I want to keep duplicating it and replicating it as much as possible. So that's why I am significantly invested in real estate and significantly uninvested in other areas. Now, I think that there's other great areas to be invested in. For me, I can only be an expert in so much. I've chosen real estate, and that's where my orbit is, and that's where my focus is.
Right, really speaks to having the knowledge and understanding the asset fully and investing.
I have
as
it,
a result.
and I understand it. And I don't understand gas and oil. I don't understand freshwater distribution, which I think is an incredible long-term investment opportunity for our grandkids today, unfortunately, because I think that's where the world's headed. I don't know a lot about a lot of things, but I know what I do know, and what I do know is real estate, and I've had my success there, and I'm able to replicate it on an annual basis. So I've made the decision not to be in real estate and stocks and bonds and gold and metals and all these other things, because I need to pick and choose something that I can check all the boxes in. Real estate checks all those boxes for me.
Yeah, because you have knowledge about that asset. Yeah.
It's tough. It's really tough to identify 100 great opportunities. You have to look at 100 to find one, maybe. So to assume that diversification is a feature that's available to everybody and speak about it so loosely, are you diversified? How diversified are you? I'm diversified. It's tough. You might be diversified in a bunch of shit, but you'll have diversification, right? Who wants to be diversified with a bunch of shitty holdings? If you can be diversified with a bunch of great holdings, that's rare. Show me who can do that. I think it's pretty rare.
Totally. Well, speaking, keeping in line with the investment conversation, gold hit an all-time high this Monday.
Yeah.
Is that a normal reaction, in your opinion? Does that feel like a normal reaction to kind of this crisis that we're in? And is the perceived security of gold a misplaced perception, or is that real?
So gold hitting an all-time high amidst a pandemic where economic loss is present in almost every industry is completely expected. Gold and precious metals are safer investment alternatives than stocks and bonds and other types of investments that require income, that require the businesses to sell to their customers. With gold, there's no business that's looking to generate revenue by selling to a customer. Gold is the commodity that you're investing in. So in times of crisis, when demand for risk is very low and demand for safety is very high, sure, gold and the metals are going to go up in price. I recommend being careful for anybody who's looking at gold right now. You always want to buy quality. Gold has certainly historically been a quality place to put money at the right time in the cycle, right? We're in the cycle now where gold's very high, so be cautious about buying into gold at the peak. You want to buy quality on dips, not at peaks. And certainly when the effects of COVID wear off at some point and demand for more risk starts to increase, demand for safety is going to decrease and gold pricing could retreat back to its pre-COVID levels. So just be wary of that. So like anything, you have to know what you're doing if you're going to choose to invest in that asset. I mean, the metals don't pay current income. They don't provide you with cash flow. They don't provide you with tax benefits. There's no depreciation with the metals. So you have to understand that, and I promise you that as soon as the world normalizes a little bit back to pre-COVID levels, you're going to want to reallocate out of gold and the metals and into investments that offer a slightly different risk return profile. I mean, it's the normal investor behavior, and I would expect that to happen again here. So no, I don't think that the security that we as an investor society find in gold and the metals, I don't think it's misplaced. I think it's well earned.
It just goes back to kind of what you said with the first question, is it's understanding your asset class and understanding it well.
Understand it. Look, you want to throw darts, by all means go ahead and throw darts, and there's a lot of guys out there that do, and they have very measurable results by doing it. I don't do that, and I'm not invested in gold. I understand why people are invested in gold. What's been great for me, even before COVID and then during COVID, has been being invested in real estate, because I get the income, I get the depreciation, the tax benefits, the leverage, the capital appreciation. And then during COVID, I've had the safety and security almost like the metals give, but without being in the metals. So I'm still able to be invested in my business and have a commitment financially to my business without having to have pulled out capital and gone to metals or other areas because of COVID. Apartment buildings have performed quite well during the pandemic. We'll see how the future looks, but for now, I'm very happy that we've been in real estate.
So Google announced this week that their work from home program is going to continue till summer of 2021.
Right.
We can talk about what that means for office space. It's something we've touched on before, but something that I really wanted to dig in on is there are some real challenges with work from home that some businesses are having, things like onboarding, transmitting company values, ensuring client confidentiality, that kind of thing. How do we anticipate these challenges instead of reacting to them?
So specific to those things that you just mentioned, onboarding, if you're working from home, really should happen seamlessly. I don't really get it. We just, for example, switched our company benefits program to a new provider, and we had a whole onboarding process that occurred for several days over the course of a week or two ago, and it was very seamless. So I think if there's an issue where the company is having trouble onboarding, they need to kick themselves in the ass. I mean, there's no reason to have work from home be an excuse not to be able to close and perform and execute on your customers and with your deals. In terms of client confidentiality and maintaining confidentiality within your team and your workplace, even though everyone's remote and from home, look, review your employment documents, adjust them for the COVID world that we're in now, make sure that the documents say what they need to say. If your team is home with trade secrets or they're out of the office and still have access to your company's information assets. I mean, that stuff can be locked down. It should be locked down. Not a big deal. And anybody who's having some risk and some problems with confidentiality and security needs to get it together and tighten it up, because that stuff can be accomplished today. It's 2020. I mean, get with it. And then as far as corporate values with your team, I mean, that's got to come from the top, and it doesn't matter if you're working from home or not. Those values should be present every day with everybody. They should be clearly communicated to everybody. There should be goals and objectives that everybody's working together to achieve, and they should be measurable. We talk about measuring goals and objectives all the time, George. So if everyone's working from home and you feel like there's a dilution of corporate values, you got to find ways to communicate them and get everybody together on the same page with that. I mean, that's priority number one. You need to have everybody working towards the same goal, and leadership has to be able to clearly communicate what the company values are, for sure. And if that's not happening now during COVID, it probably wasn't happening pre-COVID, and whoever's leading that organization needs to step it up.
Speaking of systems, last week we were talking about systems, and just a few days ago you mentioned to me that you wanted to discuss scheduling and how important that was to achieving goals and getting more done. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Scheduling's everything, day to day, man. If you don't put something on your schedule, it doesn't exist. If you don't write a goal down, it doesn't exist. You're never going to achieve it. For me, I write everything down. I schedule everything. I use heavily and rely on heavily iCal, and everybody on our team does. Everybody on our team has a different color on the calendar for their tasks. And I can look at any given week or day and see all the different colors up, and I know who's doing what at any given moment. And it's important. Transparency is great for a team. I always know what you're doing, you know what I'm doing, and we can talk about it, we can communicate about it. I mean, it's so important. So I can see what everybody's working on, they can see what I'm working on. And the objective every day is to create white. So it's a white background. So the way you create white is you either delete the task, or if the day goes by and you didn't really get to it or you didn't complete it, you move it over. And at the end of each day, I have complete white. And if you look back a day, a week, a year, if you look back at all you see is white on my calendar, because everything is either deleted or moved over. So I really encourage everybody out there, find a system that works for you. For me, it's Outlook or iCal or whatever it is. For me, it's iCal, and use it and really rely on it, and let that be the thing that dictates your day. So when you write things down on your calendar, your brain's going to be focused on getting those tasks achieved automatically. Whether your physical effort matches what your mind is thinking about or not, you're going to see results just from having written it down. So write stuff down, and you're going to plow through your days, and you're going to find it's a bit fun and competitive, even as I do. I mean, I love when I clear out my day and I got nothing but white left on my calendar at the end of the day. I'm like, yeah, this was a good day. I got a lot done. I move on to the next day. The next day, I'm booked from 5 a.m. to midnight, and I just boom, boom, boom. I go through it, delete, move over, delete, and then my calendar's clear again that day.
Do you add throughout the day, or do you kind of wait till the end of the day?
I'm constantly adding every day, and then my schedule usually books up about 6 to 8 months in advance, so I know really what my whole year looks like on a macro level at the beginning of the year. I know my big travel plans, I know my speaking engagements, I know my bank reporting requirements, I know different things that I know that occur throughout the year, special moments with friends and family, holidays, birthdays, things like that. Those obviously get calendared, but business-wise, meetings, I have long-range meetings that get booked out maybe 4 to 6 months in advance, and then shorter-term meetings that will pop up, and everything gets on the calendar. And then I start to fill in the blanks on the in-betweens and fill up the days once I have the larger macro items on the calendar, and that's my calendar. And sure, it's got to be fluid, it's got to be editable, it's got to be modifiable, because that's life, and that's your business, and that's our daily lives. I mean, nothing's fixed. Make it static, and that's what's great about these programs. You know, when I was a kid, my first business, I'll never forget it. there was a friend of mine that came up to me and said, I was 24 years old. I really still didn't know shit about shit. And a friend of mine came up to me and said, wow, Peter, how do you do it? What's your system? I was like, what? What are you talking about? What's your system? What's your system for success? Just the same question you asked me now, George. And I'm like, I don't know. What do you mean? She's like, well, how do you know? And then finally, I pulled out from my back pocket a folded up piece of 8.5 by 11 paper, because back then, that's what I had. And it was my to-do list. And I wrote everything down by hand. And when I got it done, I crossed it off. And when my 8.5 by 11 paper got too full with chicken scratch, I transferred everything that didn't get crossed off onto a new piece of paper and just started a new list. Threw the old one out, new one goes in my back pocket again. I was so appreciative that she asked me that question. Thanks, Gillian. Because it really made me think down the road as I got older and I had more interests and I had broader business concerns. How do I keep it all organized, and how do I manage it, and how do I measure it, and how do I achieve it? To me, having a to-do list was how I started, and it evolved into using modern day iCal, and you got to have something. That's what I use.
And you do this yourself?
I do it myself.
Yeah, so I think that's encouraging for people to know that this isn't something that you're pushing off to a secretary or something like this.
Well, I have that too, but
no, I know, but that you can handle this information yourself. It's not something
everyone
that's
can do it themselves.
Overwhelming and requires teams.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No,
maybe Bill Gates has a team that does it for him. I would expect he does.
Yeah.
But I would also expect that he has access to it and can modify it according to what he feels like modifying.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about leadership.
Sure.
What does leadership mean to you? And what tactics or advice do you have for people that are trying to improve their leadership skills?
So what leadership means to me is stepping up and taking an active role in determining your fate. If you sit back and you don't participate in the nuances, and if you don't participate in making the decisions and the choices that determine the micro of your day and the macro of your life, you're just sitting back and letting other factors, other people, other elements determine those things. So I think leadership is stepping up and taking the bull by the horns and trying to have an active role in determining the outcome of so many things in your life, the little and the large. Sitting back and taking a back seat and not participating was never the way to go for me. And everybody that I know that's a leader who's successful, runs a great business, who's evolutionary, who's a thinker, they all have this quality about them. Sit in the front of the class. Right? When you're a kid, often you want to sit in the back of the class. Maybe you're not sure about your own capabilities, your own intellect, so you want to maybe hide a little bit. Sit in the front of the class. Be the first to raise your hand. Be the first to ask a question and respond. Be the first to say yes when someone holding a clipboard is addressing a group that you're in and they say, who wants to, boom, hand goes up immediately. That was always me. I always was like psyched to be, because I knew that everybody else was going to be in the background and sort of look around and be like, oh, I don't want to raise my, it was like socially awkward to raise your hand first. It was socially awkward to step up. And when you're growing up and when you're learning skills that are important for business and life later on, oftentimes we want to do what the group does, right? And the group is typically not a leadership group when you're young, when you're in your teens, when you're in college. Sure, there's the standouts, but groupthink is not leadership think, in my experience.
What stood out to me when you mentioned going first is, in my experience, offering to go first has always felt like a superpower, because then you're being judged on a completely different rubric than everyone else, because you're setting the trajectory, you're setting the tone, and you have all
you're
this
being
control.
a leader.
Exactly. And it changes the whole experience that otherwise you would have to follow someone else. Yeah.
There's so many times in my life that I remember, I can think back on them now, and I remember raising my hand first, going first, taking that first step in the group. I put my little signature on it, and I got through the drill, the course, the example, whatever it was I was doing, and I noticed everybody that went after me in the class or the group sort of did what I did. They saw me get through, and I saw others take the first step, and I remember watching them do it. I said, wow, they just succeeded at it. That's the way to do it. I'll do it that way too. Leadership to me is stepping up, taking the bull by the horns, and really minimizing the amount that other elements, people, and things affect your life and your outcomes. You want to be able to drive your own outcomes.
Yeah, so that's something I wanted to ask you about. You mentioned about not being as affected by public opinion, and you've spoken a lot about not wasting time worrying about other people's opinions.
Yeah, it's important.
How do you guard against this for yourself, or how would you advise other people to guard
For
against
myself, yeah, I mean, at this point in my life, I see something very clear. What I see is that we're all equal, and we all have the same ability to make choices and decisions, which those choices and decisions will then dictate outcomes in our life. You know, except for the 1% of the 1% of 1% out there who are genetically, intellectually, and physically superior than the rest of us.
The Michael Jordans of the world.
The Michael Jordans of the world, I mean, they're born, there's something at a core level within their cellular makeup, in their DNA, that we just can't compete with, right? They just have it, right? But there's so few Michael Jordans out there. We can list them, there's a short list. The rest of us are free to make choices. We've talked about all the things that we can make choices about, George. I mean, fulfillment, self-awareness, execution, expertise, kindness, right? These are the things that we've talked about a lot here on the show. And when you choose those things, you're going to separate yourself from everybody else. When you choose to have higher levels of expertise, higher levels of self-awareness, higher levels of mindset, you're going to separate yourself from everybody else. Who's casting their opinions on you? Everybody else. Other successful people that possess high levels of mindset, awareness, fulfillment, execution, expertise, all these things, right? Those people rarely, if at all, are casting their opinions on you and I. The opinions come from the so-called peanut gallery. The peanut gallery is filled with everybody that can't quite get it together. They display low levels of those things we just talked about. So I see that very clearly. If you can choose to have these things, you'll rise above the pack. I mean, look, I'm no Michael Jordan. I'm no Warren Buffett. I'm not the world's most profound thinker by far. But I have the ability to make choices, and I make those choices. And I think everybody can make those choices. Opinions don't matter. The people making the opinions are the ones who are sitting around with their thumbs up their asses. They're either jealous of people who can display high levels of those things we mentioned, or they're pissed off at themselves that they can't seem to get out of their own way to make those decisions for themselves. Whatever it is, opinions come and go. You don't need them. All you need is yourself and your ability to make those good choices for you and your family.
Yeah, and the most toxic part, it sounds like, of taking those opinions to heart seems to be paralysis and being afraid to move forward, and that if you just move forward, then all of a sudden that frees you up for a whole host of abilities and opportunities.
George, there is no successful person that I know, whether I've met them or not, that ever became successful by giving a shit about what someone else thought. You forge your own way. I mean, you have a vision, you have the awareness, you execute on the vision. I mean, you don't need the opinions of other people. You know, maybe in life you need encouragement from others, from people that you love, but that's encouragement, that's not opinion. You know, maybe in life you need help and mentorship and advice along the way. That's advice and mentorship, those aren't opinions. Opinions sort of have like this negative, childish connotation about it. And we all have opinions about everything, sure, but you know, your question really was about the opinions of others on what we do in business and in investing and as leaders. I mean, who gives a shit about the other people's opinions, really?
I dig that. Well, and that actually rolls right perfectly into my Zest quests.
Zest me.
So
no softballs this week.
I'm going to try to throw all hardballs this week.
All right.
Who are 1 to 3 people you've learned from or followed closely in the last year?
Off the top of my head, I have to say my daughter, because of the purity of the way the child mind thinks. I'm so interested in that, and it's really calming to me, and I learn a lot from it, and I try and take the things that I learn and bring it out to my real adult world when I leave the house every day. My friend Fred, who's an incredibly successful businessman and has achieved incredible things in his life, and I've gotten the chance to spend some time with him over the past year, and have learned so much from him and appreciate the things that he shares with me, for sure. He comes from a different generation than me. He's older, and he's of my father's generation. He's in his 80s now, and he's got a very old school way of thinking about things, but he hasn't missed a beat in 2020. And he thinks about things very succinctly, very sternly, very directly, appreciates the military way of thinking when running an organization, but in a softer manner, but very organized, very direct, very simple, very pure, very fast, and to the point. And I appreciate those types of things, and he shares with me a lot of that, and I appreciate that from him. Also, I think about my friend Jason, who's a contemporary of mine, and also very successful in his business. Very creative thinker. I mean, he's got the basics down and more when it comes to numbers and analysis and business sense, but very open-minded guy. Jason, with all the things that he's achieved in his career and in his life, decided one day a year ago he wanted to go to Harvard and get a Harvard degree. What does he do? In the middle of running his billions of dollars in revenue company, he picks up, moves to Boston for a while, gets a Harvard degree. I mean, it's an incredible thing to just do when you're in your late 40s or early 50s and you've got a family and you've got work and a company and all the stuff that goes on. I mean, how do you do that? So I thought that was an incredible thing, and I was in awe of that particular thing that he did and so many other things that he's talked about and done over the years. And I appreciate with him how he displays such a wide variety of skills and such a wide variety of mindset abilities, from the numeric and the quantitative to the creative. And he's a doer, and he flies planes, and he's charitable. He's a great leader himself, and so really fun to watch him and to follow his path as well. And I think lastly, what comes to mind, and I almost said this first, but I wanted to wait till the end, was I'm always watching my 3 older brothers. I learned so much from them, and you mentioned over the past year is the time frame, so here we are in COVID, and I've really learned so much from each one of them about how they pivoted and made decisions in their lives and in their businesses and with their families, and we've all communicated together about all of it, and I've learned so much from them on how they think through these tough times. And I've always appreciated them and have had the benefit of them being my older brothers. They went first, so I sort of got to see what to do and what not to do. And even today, that still exists. And I've really enjoyed and appreciated that we're all able to be together and speak and share what we're all doing and how we're doing it. Because I think they're smart, they get it, they get so much, and I suck everything off of them just absorb it like a sponge, because they've been such an important factor in my life. And so while I didn't just start following them,
They're a mainstay.
They're a mainstay, and for me, they've been great.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, and last question. If a song played every time you entered a room, what song would that be?
Oh, come on, man. You got Jungle Land by Bruce.
Classic.
And not much more. I mean, I could pick 30 other Bruce songs that I can fill in the blank with, but Jungle Land, I mean, has it all. It's rock and roll, it's theater, it's a story, it's emotional, and it's all the things that life should be. So when I hear that song, I'm like living a whole life, and I'll just keep playing it over and over and again. And not only do I scream the lyrics when I hear that song, but I also scream note for note and nuance for nuance all of Clarence's sax solo. That's when people really know I'm fucking nuts, when they hear me start singing the sax solo. Because anyone can sing lyrics, I recognize, but when you can do a sax solo at the top of your lungs and not care who hears it, I challenge anybody to do that.
It's also a pretty long song, so whenever you enter the room, people are definitely going to know it's you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Peter. I appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks, George. Thanks, everybody.
See you next week. If you like what you just heard, you can subscribe to The Daily Cash Flow on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And we'd love it if you left us a review. You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook at SiegelCap and on Instagram at Siegel.cap. As always, if you're an accredited investor, go to SiegelCapital.com and take our survey to see if you qualify to take part in one of our apartment building deals. That's SIEGEL Capital.com.